people are judging themselves. A more interesting way to put it is, why is it that I didn't express my feelings? Now, here's the thing. Again, in my writing, in The Myth of Normal, I quote this great neuroscientist who died in his mid-70s of cancer a few years ago. Those of us who knew him still mourn him. His name was Dr. Jaak Panksepp, Panksepp. He was from the Baltic states, whether he was Estonian, I think he was, but maybe Latvian, And he was an affective neuroscientist, so he studied the neurobiology of emotions. And he wrote a book called The Archaeology of the Mind. It's one of the seminal books of modern science. And he pointed out that we share certain emotional circuits with other animals. So we have circuitry, and he capitalized these circuits, these systems. So the CARE, the care system. And there was a system for anger, a system for fear, for lust, for playfulness, for joy, in other words, for seeking, which is curiosity, grief. And we share these brain circuits with other mammals. In other words, these emotions are not luxuries. They are emotionally, I should say, they are evolutionarily determined aspects of who we are. So, if you take the care system, it's essential, because without care, the mammalian infant doesn't survive. There's got to be something in the parent's brain that drives that parent to take care of the infant, and something that's in the infant's brain that impels them to connect with the parent in order to be taken care of. That's just evolutionary biology. So, we have all these emotional systems. Anger is one of them. As I mentioned, fear, grief are others. And children, one of the emotional needs of children, when I studied and and interviewed experts on child development, one of the things I learned and write about is that one of the needs of children for healthy brain development is the freedom to experience and express all the emotions that come up for them. That's just necessary for health. Now, what happens in this society where a lot of parents get the message that certain emotions on the part of their kids are not acceptable? So, a kid might experience a loss, like a dog might die or grandpa might die, and the child is upset. And the parent can't handle the child's grief. So snap out of it, it's just a dog, or get over it, people die. Or a child experiences anger because you didn't give them a cookie before dinner, and a 2-year-old throws a tantrum and you can't handle it. I think you and I have talked about this before. Then the child gets the message that in order to be acceptable to the parent, they have to suppress their emotions. So when these people talk about that, and that suppression of emotion, as I've often made the case with you and in my books, actually undermine health and our physiology and our immune system. So when these people in their dying weeks regret not having had the courage to express their emotions, what they're really talking about is that long time before, when they were children, they were forced to suppress their emotions for the sake of being accepted. And now they regret it because they sense that they were forced to abandon themselves. And so, again, I would remove the word courage and ask, instead of judging them for lacking courage, I would say, what happened to them? Because, again, no infant lacks the capacity to express their emotions. So if they lose it, it's because they learned that they had to.
In terms of something practical around this point, Gabor, if there's any parents listening and their kids, let's say, sometimes get angry or have a tantrum or whatever it might be. Of course, there is a certain conditioning in our modern, certainly in Western society, about what one should do about that. Given your view in terms of what is important for a child and what you've just said, what would you encourage a parent to do when their child is, I was going to use the word playing up, but that's a ridiculous term because playing up is a societal construct.
Yeah.
A child is just expressing emotions. We're calling it playing up because we don't like, what it's doing or what the people next door are thinking or whatever it might be, right?
The North American term is acting out.
Acting out.
Yeah. Do they use that phrase here?
Yeah, they do. They use this phrase here.
Yeah.
So going back to that, the parent who may be struggling, but wants to be a better parent, wants to go, actually, you know what, Gabor, I really want to make sure that I allow my child to express their emotions.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for me? What would you say to them?
No, I do. Well, so, there's, we can talk about 3 modes of parenting. One is the permissive parenting, where you allow any behavior and you don't interfere, that's the worst thing you can do. Kids needs to.
But that is allowing them to express themselves.
But there's a difference.
Okay.
They might express themselves by hitting their sibling, for example, and you don't allow that. Kids need to feel that somebody's in charge.
Yeah.
Parenting is not a democracy; it's a hierarchy. In a hierarchy, there's a dominant force. The parent dominates the child, not to exploit or to suppress, but to nurture and to support. So that, you live in Manchester, and I don't know how cold it gets in Manchester, but if you have a 1-year-old child, they don't get to vote on whether they get to crawl outside in the wintertime in Manchester, naked. The parent says, no, you don't go outside naked. You have to put clothes on. That's just how it is. It's a hierarchy. It's not a democracy. The 1-year-old doesn't get a vote on going into the slush and the snow in the middle of December or whenever. So that's permissive parenting. That's not very good. Then there's repressive parenting, which some experts that we've talked about advocate. That's authoritarian parenting. In between them is the golden mean. So there's permissive parenting here, authoritarian parenting here, then there's authoritative parenting in the middle. Authoritative parenting is I'm in charge. I know what's good for you. I'm the authority. So I know what to do with you. So if a child is upset, you say, oh, you're upset. You're angry with mommy. Mommy wouldn't let you have a cookie before dinner. Yeah, you're really upset about that. Yeah, well, come here. I know how you feel. In other words, you validate the emotion. You don't punish the child for it, and you hold the child, because the child needs to learn that they can go through these difficult emotions and get through them.
And still be loved.
And still be loved, yeah. Now, that doesn't mean you let them pull the cat's tail or to break the glass, smash the furniture or hit their sibling, but it does mean you validate the emotions and you hold them. Yeah. And then they learn, and actually... And it's also age specific. Mm-hmm. Like there's no point saying to an angry 1.5-year-old, let's express it through words. They don't have the words. Mm-hmm. But to a 5-year-old, you can say, can we find some words for your anger? In other words, you can teach them to express their emotions in ways that are socially appropriate.
Yeah.
So at any age, you have to be age appropriate. But fundamentally, you validate the emotions and you hold the child and you make them feel that you can have these emotions. I don't want you behaving that way, but you can have the emotion and I'm not going to reject you for it. It's not that hard. And people do it intuitively sometimes.
Yeah. And the impact of parenting like that will be felt for the rest of that child's life.
Well, absolutely.
And that's the key, isn't it? You look around society, it's very, very hard to not make the case that we have to set up society so that those early years are where the kids get good nutrition, they have calm environments, they have present parents. I'm always shocked at the amount of leave that people in America get, or mothers get in jobs in America. I think one of my friends' partners in America got 2 weeks off.
Oh,
which I 2 weeks off after giving birth.
Well, when I researched the myth of normal, I found that 25% of women in the States go back to work within 2 weeks of giving birth, which 25% of women, and needless to say, this is both economically and racially determined. But it means that it's a massive abandonment of the child.
Yeah.
Because from the point of view of the development of enzymes in the child's physiological unfoldment, psychological security, they need the mother for many, 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 many months. And you try and take an infant away from an orangutan at 2 weeks and see what happens.
Yeah.
You know, and in fact, they've done some very cruel studies with monkeys that shows the impact of maternal deprivation at those early ages. You know, studies that are terrible to read about.
Yeah.
And they prove what? They prove that love and contact and connection is important, something we should have known all along. But the point is that the statistic that 25% of women have to go back to work within 2 weeks of giving birth, it's a massive abandonment of children, the impact of which will show up in their mental and physical health decades on.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why there's so many problems.
Tomorrow is the yearly prescribing lifestyle medicine course that I've been running with a colleague, Dr. A.M. Panja, since 2018. And of course, you're going to be the guest speaker tomorrow. And I'm really excited that we're going to be able to communicate with doctors and share your work and how they can bring your work into their practice. It's really, really exciting. One of the things I'm hoping you're going to be able to share with the audience tomorrow is what I think is the biggest hole in medical school training. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I may have said, oh, nutrition and sleep, and we need to teach doctors about the importance of this stuff, and we do.
Yeah.
But if I had to choose one thing that I think is the biggest hole in medical training today, for me, it's that a lot of doctors leave medical school without an understanding that our emotions,
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
that the way we think, holding on to anger, resentment, not being able to forgive and move on, I really don't feel within medicine there's an understanding that this can contribute to ill health.
Yeah, it's such a gap. And I think both you and I have had to discover it not as a consequence, but despite our medical education.
Yeah.
And when you're in practice as a family physician, we do have an advantage over specialist colleagues in that we know people before they get sick.
Yeah.
So we get to see who gets sick. And I couldn't help but notice that people's emotional lives are so intertwined with their physiological health. And as you suggest, nobody in medical school told me that. It's a huge gap. And it also has to do with how we relate to ourselves, by the way, because the way doctors are trained is very often very stressful and very almost traumatic in significant ways. So that's why I mentioned the word self-care, because in being trained to stoically ignore ourselves, we also are dismissing the importance of emotions in our clients.
Yeah.
So that I wish there was more emphasis in medical school on dealing with our own stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And in conjunction with that, therefore, the awareness of the importance of people's emotional lives.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting here is that some of the great pioneers of medicine have known this all along, and they've said it hundreds of years ago. Well, Jean Martin-Charcot, who first described multiple sclerosis, said that this is related to stress and grief. And it is statistically and according to studies since then, but he just saw it. He didn't, and there's a great British surgeon, James Paget, Paget's disease, and he operated on women with breast cancer. And he said that breast cancer is indubitably related to emotional factors, that it's so evident that it's hard to ignore. And so these great pioneers said this, and their teachings have been completely ignored.
Yeah. Let's be really clear. This is such a delicate area for people because many people perceive that as fault and as blame. I know you don't mean it like that. I don't mean it like that when I talk about it either.
Yeah.
But often it's like, what are you saying, that I did this to myself, right? So you must have had that before. People must have said that.
Yeah.
Just clarify that for them, please.
Well, really, we've been talking about it. that the suppression of emotion, nobody's born with it. And it's not a lack of courage or wisdom. It's a programmed response to childhood experience. So people have got the message before they had any choice in the matter, that if they are truly themselves, if they express who they are, their emotions, just like we've been talking about, they won't be accepted. So that's a programming that people are ingrained in early childhood. How is that their fault?
Yeah.
It's just the way they adapted to the environment necessarily. As a matter of fact, it was an inevitable and unavoidable adaptation, because the alternative of being rejected by their families or their milieu was not acceptable to a small child. So therefore, nobody does this to themselves in any conscious or deliberate sense. What I can tell you is that when people are diagnosed and they become aware of these dynamics, they find that liberating.
Yeah.
So in The Myth of Normal, I quote the American singer Sheryl Crow, who was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she said that before the diagnosis, I was always pleasing others and not expressing myself. And there was always a voice in my head that I'm wrong and I have to adjust myself to other people's expectations. I'm paraphrasing her, but she said, I've learned differently now. And now I'm really paying attention to myself. So again, this idea of diseases.